Take a look at this documentary-style map animation.
On February 28th, the U.S. declared war on Iran. Almost immediately, F-35s took off from Israel to launch a devastating air campaign. The U.S. and Israel thought that was the end of it. But what they didn't expect was for Iran to launch a counterattack and close the Strait of Hormuz, paralyzing the world's energy supply.
I built this using only Claude Code and Remotion, and I'll show you exactly how to build it for yourself. Let's get into it. But before we get into the prompts, since we're using Remotion, we need to understand these three concepts. Now, the first concept is World Atlas. The next one is TopoJSON, and then D3Geo. Now, these are functions and libraries, and honestly, you don't need to understand what they do, but you just need to get an idea of what they're used for. So World Atlas, for example, it has a repository of all the countries outlined as raw data points, essentially. So think of it like Lego pieces out of a box. And then you have TopoJSON, and this consists of all of the data points about boundaries that are shared between two different countries, for example. Now, TopoJSON is what does the unpacking. So it takes all of those little Lego pieces and puts them together. And then finally, you have the D3Geo library. Essentially, what D3Geo does is that it's a projection function. So it takes the Earth, which is a sphere, and then it projects it onto your 2D screen. So we're going to start with the first prompt over here. So I'm saying set up a Remotion project for a documentary style animated map video, build the world map from real geographical data, get the country shapes from World Atlas, unpack them with TopoJSON. So I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to put this in my Claude Code right here, along with the Skool practice kit, and I'm going to run that. So while that's running, let me just give you a bit more detail about what's going on. So I'm giving it all of the style references. So I'm saying deep navy ocean, darken at the edges, and then I'm also asking it for a subtle sort of film grain look baked into the map itself. Okay, so the one important rule to remember, guys, for the entire film is that this is obviously being built scene by scene, but every scene must start on the exact frame of the previous scene. So essentially, if scene 1 is ending, scene 2 should start on the last frame of scene 1. And it just feels like one continuous shot. So you can see that it's setting up the data pipelines for real geos. So now we have the setup done. Let's go over the first scene. So the first scene is Trump rising over America, right? So all of the image assets I have sitting on a project folder. And, you know, honestly, this is just a full body Trump cutout, some fighter jets, a missile, tanker, so on and so forth. So the prompt over here is build scene 1 about 8 seconds. The camera starts on the full world map, zooms into the US and holds. The US gets a white glowing outline, then a solid red circle pops up in the middle of the country. So you can see how I'm just describing how I want the motion to be, for example. And then I'm saying there's a transparent full body photo of Trump already in the assets folder, make him black and white and have him rise up. So I'm just telling Claude Code to do all of that Photoshop work. So I don't have to go into Photoshop and make images black and white or stylized, whatever that may be. So I'm just getting Claude Code to do that and then stitch it in. So you can see this is what it looks like. So the asset has a transparent background and then he's rising out of the US. Now, one important animation technique you should know over here is ease out. So ease out is just an easing function. Now it's a one-line function, so you don't have to actually know what it is, but then it's good for you to know what it does. So just to give you a quick example, so here I have a few different easing functions. So you have, this is linear, and obviously this looks very mechanical and robotic, and this is ease in and out, right? And then you have ease back, which has a bit of that bouncy effect. And then finally you have ease out, which I like the best just because it gives it that Vox style effect. So I'm just going to copy scene 1 over here and go back to Claude Code. Okay, so now that scene 1's built, let's go check it out. All right, so you see the zoom in, circle, and then Trump comes up. Okay, so that's good. But what I would like to do, however, is perhaps change some of the sizes over here. So what I would do is, all right, so I'm going to change Trump's size a little bit so it looks a bit more Okay, so that's what that looks like. I think I'm happy with how that looks. So he eases out of that circle, and then we have a pan, and then that last frame ends on Israel. That's because the next scene, which is scene 2, will start on Israel, basically. So if we go back to our little explainer over here, now we've completed this, which is scene 1. Now scene 2 is about 8 seconds, starting on the exact Israel frame scene 1 ended on. So outline Israel in its blue flag and Iran in its flag red, and have each country's flags spring up from the map. And then you have a top-down fighter jet image, which is already in the folder. So 3 jets take off from Israel and they fly towards Iran, and the camera pans along with those jets. And then obviously, they hit the target. There's some animations. There's a fireball animation as well. And I'll just show you how to do that. So this is what the beats look like. So the Israel, the land, it lights up in blue, jets cross, and then we have the strikes landing over here. And then finally, you have those red marks that linger on Iran. Now, one thing to remember here, guys, is the keying trick, right? So I have this in the asset folder. I have this explosion video over here, and this obviously has a black background. Now, if you were to paste it just like that into the map, it's going to look something like this. But if you key it out, and you can just ask Claude Code, and we're using a screen blend method over here, so you can change the different blend modes over here. So you can go to normal, you can look at overlay, you can look at lighten. So I go with screen just because it really enhances the lighter areas and completely eliminates the blacks. And finally, going on to scene 3, we have the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, right? So this is a 15-second scene, and it's starting again on the last frame of scene 2. So we have a tight zoom in on the Strait of Hormuz, and then we have the dotted lines appear, the missiles flying across, and this is what it looks like, right? So we have the missiles going about, and then we have the blockade. And everything is just like one continuous shot, guys, so it just looks like a film, but in fact, it's like you're giving it to Claude Code in chunks. If there's any sort of issue with one chunk, you can go and fix it rather than build the whole thing out. That becomes a lot more tricky because it might fix something, but break something else in another scene. So finally, what we do is we combine all 3 scenes into a master timeline, and they start and they end on those frames that we spoke about. So the cuts are seamless. But we don't just stop there, because what we want is we want that sort of film grain, that dusty sort of video look in those vintage cassette players, basically. And let me show you what that looks like. So we have a before over here, and then after we overlay a film grain, it just gives it that Vox style look, and I just really like it. So this is before, and that's the after. Very nice. And then what you want to do is you want to get the narrator's voice, a score, and all of the background music for that, and also the foley. So if your Claude Code is connected to 11 Labs MCP or 11 Labs API, you can actually pick your narrator from Claude Code itself, right? So it'll give you narrator picks. So this is the one that I went for. I could go for Gideon. I could go for this other one, which is Maya. But I picked Sterling, and I just liked it for that whole documentary effect. And finally, after that, we're building that cinematic dread music as well. And again, Claude Code does this for you. So it can even generate the prompt and generate the background music as well. And then after that, you have all of the foley, and this is a list of all of the ones that it generated. So you have riser, you've got blip, you've got sonar over here, and all of this will be stitched automatically by Claude Code. So you're just telling it to do what you want it to do. So you'll see this is the prompt for the audio generation. So generate a dark, slow building tension music bed for the full routine. Add the 3 voiceover lines, 1 per scene. And then layer in the sound effects, whooshes, as the camera moves on. So finally, once you've done all of that, you have your complete composition. And then at the end of this, you'll have a 30-second map animation. So there you go, a 30-second map animation built entirely from code. And you don't need a $300 After Effects plugin to achieve this. Now it's your turn to try it out. Now all of the assets and a detailed how-to guide are in my free Skool community. The link is in the description. And don't forget to subscribe, because I got more of these Vox style animation videos coming up. Have a good day.